I'm here today because I am still doing my reconnaissance of the damage done by Hurricane Beryl. So I've toured the southern end of the island, aerial and ground tour. I'm not complete with the southern end because the impact is significant. But I also wanted to tour some of the other areas that were impacted but not severely, so that I could get a sense of what is the response and how the response should be. So I was in Hanover and a few parts of Westmoreland, and I took the opportunity to hand over some of our social housing under the new social housing program, which I should just take this opportunity to say that all of our social housing stood up to the hurricane. None of them were destroyed. We have 280 social housing units, and I don't know how many of you know about what we do under the new social housing program, but this is a government funded and executed program where we have a well-established beneficiary identification system which looks for the worst of the worst living conditions. So we look for families whose housing conditions would be the worst of the worst. And then we do an assessment of their income, their family's income, the number of children, the number of elderly, and then we make a decision as to whether or not we provide them with a solution. What they bring to the table, they have to have a piece of land somewhere. And if they don't have land, then they should have access to land. And we help them with that. We help them to get the land leased. We help them to get approval to use the land that they're currently on, or help them to acquire titles. So we do it all in the proper way. And these houses are well built. In fact, I said to one of the beneficiaries today that your house is so well built that I'm certain it could become a shelter. And he laughed reluctantly. Obviously, he doesn't want his house to become a shelter. But they're a very well built house. We've handed over more than 230 houses, and we have about 50 in varying stages of construction. So almost every week we try to hand over the houses. So I did that today in Hanover, in Western Hanover. Now, I decided that since I was in Hanover, then I should come to Negril, because Negril has been popping up on the top of my priority list for the past 3 or 4 months, mainly because of water. I should have printed out all the mails that have come from, and I'm seeing some faces, I'm seeing some smiles in the room, because yes, I read them. Believe me, I do. I do read them, even if I don't respond, because sometimes I can't respond, or sometimes I just didn't get the time to respond. But I do read them because it helps to form my response. In other words, what do I say to the minister who has charge of the subject, or what do I say to the permanent secretary who has charge, or to the Minister of Finance regarding funding? So I decided that it would have been appropriate, even at short notice, to meet with the leaders and the stakeholders in Negril, because the truth is that Negril straddles 2 parishes, straddles Hanover and Westmoreland. So that's a good place to start, because I know you're here in your mind saying, what is the plan for Negril? What is the plan for Negril? So let's start with, how is Negril managed? Because Negril as a town is growing far beyond its infrastructure but it is also growing far beyond the system set for local governance. So our system is that the towns are within a parish, and the boundaries determine which local authority has control over the town. Because of the spatial expansion of Negril, the organic expansion of Negril, you have crossed over into Hanover. So the town is expanding, and it is not just under the jurisdiction of Westmoreland. Some of it is also under the jurisdiction of Hanover. That leaves a gap. Who really is in charge? But the worst problem is, who really is going to take the initiative? I think that is one of the things that is affecting the town as to the programs and plans that could be executed under the current local arrangements. So I have said before that we intend to make a different arrangement in terms of municipal management for Negril. So we have to do that necessary exercise of the consultation with the stakeholders, and then do the necessary legislative changes to actually give Negril its own municipal authority, its own municipal character. Now, I know when we talk about this, there is, especially for persons who are not in Negril, there is a sense as, why am I trying to disturb this well-established, long, established governance architecture? In other words, that's part of the concern. Why do I want Portmore to become a parish? Without paying attention to the fact that towns, cities have to be managed. The issues of towns and townships and urban centers, they have to be managed from a local level. And if the people in the towns don't have the power and authority to manage their local issues, then you begin to see what is happening. It's almost like a free-for-all, and then you don't get initiative being taken. And it's a fundamental principle of governance. It's called subsidiarity. Where the problem lies, that's where the solution should be. Where people have their agency, meaning their individual drive to do things for themselves, then any superior authority should empower them to be able to do things for themselves. And what I detect in Negril is that the stakeholders want to do things for themselves based upon all the communications that I get. In fact, the stakeholders do much more lobbying than, I know it's going to be problematic, than the political representatives, meaning at the local level. So once you see that happening, then you know that there is an energy there, that if a proper structure were put in place, you could see an improved municipal management of this township, this urban space. So that is on my agenda to do. There have been some attempts at it. You have the Galpa, but it's really a kind of half-hearted attempt at putting in place the proper municipal management that is needed. In other words, Portmore had the same issue, and that is why the previous administration defined Portmore as a municipality, to give it its own management of that, that energy that is there. And Negril is going through the same thing. The only challenge we will have is that we will have a municipality that crosses parish boundaries. And so we'd have to work that out. I mean, we have started to give thought to it legislatively, how that would work. But the direction is that Negril really needs to have its own municipal authority to manage its affairs. So that's one thing. The second issue with Negril is that it has not only outgrown the local governance management structure, it has outgrown the physical infrastructure. Now, like most towns in Jamaica, Jamaica is you would describe the formation of Jamaica as a maritime commercial arrangement, meaning that most, especially in the early days of colonialization, most of Jamaica's industry would tend towards export and import. So most of our towns were right along the seaside, the coastal towns, because that's what we were. Even sugar, which was an interior crop, I mean, the ultimate objective is to export it. So almost all of our towns, our major towns, are on the coast. But that's not the real issue, The real issue is that most of our major roads are on the coast. And that's because of our history as a maritime enterprise. So almost all our roads, and you can see it here as you come from St. James, coming all around, going all around, they're all coastal roads. The big problem is that they are all at risk at the moment. During that unexpected nor'easterly, which converged with a nor'westerly, which damaged many parts of the road coming into Negril, it would show that we need to rethink the infrastructure from a climate change perspective. Where do we put our roads? The second thing is that there wasn't really a planned town. So there was a small nucleus of planning. I believe it was in the 50s. Ed, you certainly were around then, so you could tell. When some lands were purchased here in the 60s. In the 60s, when some lands were purchased here for development purposes. But largely, the town has just grown unplanned and organically so. And then the tourism industry, that has grown largely organically so. And whenever the tourism industry is growing, you're going to find communities growing along with it, because you need those communities to provide the workers. But more than that, it is the communities that provide the feel, the ambience, the culture, because it's the people that create all of that. So we can't look at the towns, the communities that have emerged, the informal communities, as a problem, right? They are a part of the product, and what we need to figure out is how to improve their conditions, how to structure them properly, because if we did that, Ed, the product would improve dramatically. And that's the thinking. So in terms of the development plan, the first thing that we see is that we need to organize the town center. We need to actually build a town center. So we have asked FCJ, that is the Factories Corporation of Jamaica, which is doing exactly what I'm proposing for Negril, where we've actually started that. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to go in the eastern end of the island and see what we have done in St. Thomas, where we are building a new urban center on 25 acres of land. It's fantastic. When you get an opportunity, you should look at it. In another few weeks, we'll be breaking ground for Boundbrook in Port Antonio, another town center we're going to construct. along this stretch, we are contemplating Lucy, and we're contemplating here in Negril. So we have identified a piece of land that's between the police station and the gas station, I believe it is. That's correct. I forget the name of the road. Non-Parial. Numprel. I know the people from Westmoreland. Yes, I believe it's about 40 acres of land. Some of it is informally settled, and that's a whole knot to untie. But we have the expertise in doing that. So one of the reasons why I'm here is to kind of put you on notice that the process of consultation towards these grand objectives, and I've named 3 of them. First is your new municipal arrangement. The second is the rebuilding and relocation of major infrastructure like your roadway. And then third, the building of the town center. There is the 4th objective, which is to regularize and improve communities. That will also be undertaken. Now, I'm coming to water. You would include water under infrastructure, but I'm going to deal with water separately. Now, these changes don't happen overnight. And in a liberal democracy like ours, for some people, they might interpret change as they are losing, and they have a right to object to change. And the only way to treat with that is to have a process of engagement, a process of consultation, where the fear of change can be properly dealt with. So everyone who has a concern that this is going to change and it is going to take away my livelihood, or I'm going to be deprived of where I used to live, or the way I used to do business, I can't do it anymore. All of these are legitimate questions, and we can't force people into change. And in fact, what we really want to do is to get people to voluntarily comply with change. But we have to show them what the vision is. People have to be able to buy into the vision. So I'm putting everyone on notice that we are going to start an intensive program of discussing what is the future of my Negril. Right? Now, it can't just be what I think. It has to be what the stakeholders and the citizens and everyone who has an interest in Negril to at least have their say. But you know what? We don't want to have analysis paralysis, because we're famous for that we just talk, and nothing happens. And this is the most frustrating thing, because there's a lot of talk in government and a lot of processes and systems. And what I'm finding in government is that people are more interested in the form of how things are done rather than the function of things. So there's a lot of attention paid to form rather than efficiency. Now, that's the nature of a bureaucracy. I mean, the definition of a bureaucracy is that you get things achieved and done by following a particular format. But let's make that format efficient. Let's make it quick. And for us, however, sometimes we tend to believe that the longer it takes, the better it is done. And that's obviously not the case. So, yes, we will have consultations, but it's not going to be everlasting. And you will note that every major project that the government is undertaking, we have consultations involved. So we have launched the largest road program in the history of Jamaica, the Spark program. And every community, every constituency must conduct consultations. to help to determine the road priorities. So any large project that we're doing, a part of it must be to come to you, the people, and you have your opportunity to tear it up and put it back together again. But not an extended forever. It's set within a limited period of time, sufficient for everybody's voice to be heard, sufficient for us to process what you have said, and then we come back to you and say, based upon what everybody has said, based upon the fears, based upon the concerns, here is the final plan. Right? So that I want to give you that assurance that whatever we do, you are going to be an integral part of it, because that is the nature of living in a liberal democracy, which is Jamaica, a liberal democracy. Now, let me turn to water. I gather now that the situation has improved. Is that the case?
Well, come on, now's your chance to speak up. Is it better or is it not? Tell them if it's not.
It got better until the hurricane, and then it got worse again. Yes.
It's back.
It's back again.
But it's back, right?
Yeah.
And he said that before, the pressure is much higher and all that.
So look, I get it, right? You'll never tell a politician that it's great. You can't do that. You can't do that, and I understand that. But, so, look, I'm asking, but I monitor, so I do know what the situation is. They give me a report. What I'm doing is trying to reconcile my report with the feedback, all right? So, satisfaction is a very difficult thing to gauge. I mean, you might have water in your pipe, but you're just not satisfied. There might be other issues. It might be intermittent. One thing I'm certain of, though, from an objective perspective, is that your water pressure is better. Right? So that's one objective way to look at the improvement in the water supply. So let's talk about water a few more minutes. Firstly, there are enough water sources in this area and in proximity to the area to supply Negril's need for now and the foreseeable future. The challenge is with all water sources is that some underground, and sometimes they move. Like in this particular case, we had a access point to water at one point, and then by some, some environmental or whatever it is, some hydrological phenomena, the water shifted to somewhere else. I believe it shifted 600 meters from where the original source was. And then we have droughts, which are becoming more frequent and more intense. And then the real big problem, in my opinion, is that the systems that were built were not built to carry the level of use that is demanded of it today. That's just the bottom line. Those systems were built 40 to 50 years ago. Some of the hotels that are here, I would venture to say that 40 to 50 years ago, 50% of the hotels that are here now were not here. More like 70, you're saying. So it just can't carry. That's the reality. So we ended up doing a process called pigging, where we clear the lines which were encrusted with buildup of sediments. We put in some new lines, which you would see going on, and we connected to another source. And so we have been able to pump more water into Negril. And that is what has accounted for your increased pressure and greater supply. The problem of the lock-offs, that's just as a result of the interruption of electricity supply to the pumps. And as soon as we have sorted out the electrical issues, you should get back to having reliably enough supply. All right, it's not going to be perfect, but reliably enough. But you would have noted that we have approved a $100 million US dollar program to put in an entirely new pipeline and a new water distribution backbone for the entire North Coast, because the problem is not just Negril, it's the entire North Coast. So we have made the capital investment for that. So in another 2 years, you will have reliable supply, and it is future-proof for another 50 years based upon the sizing that we have done and the projections of capacity and so forth. Now, that is an example of your government at work. And we have moved as quickly as we could to make this kind of allocation and investment possible. And we are doing it without borrowing, which is absolutely important. I want to talk a little bit about security, because that is a perennial challenge. I'll say this, Ed, I know our guests are safe. Because when I come to Negril, I see more than any other town, except maybe for Port Antonio, but even more than Port Antonio, I see our guests integrated. That's the best word to use. Integrated into the mix of things in Negril. And it tells you this is a tourist town. You know, this is the people here understand tourism. So I have no doubt about the safety and welcome and hospitality that our guests receive. But, you know, security is about everyone. And some of our citizens don't feel safe. And that is because of the entrenchment of gangs in this part of the island. And the challenge with gangs is that they integrate themselves into every element of community. And they find ways to undermine law and order. And then they create their own force for evil, which ends up sometimes you have a kind of, innocent people who have nothing to do with the gang activities being caught up. So the police has taken a strategic approach to dealing with the gangs. We have used the anti-gang legislation, and all of the gangs, I'll be very frank with you, every gang, our intelligence entities are at work. And I gather that one of the major gang kingpins in this region, that he was, he's before the court, and I believe that he was convicted, my understanding, and will be sentenced shortly. And we will continue to bring them before the court one by one until we dismantle all the gangs. There is also, I am aware, issues to do with public order within not just Negril, but in SAV as well. And the directives have been given that we must improve public order. We don't have the full complement and enough manpower in this area because, particularly for Negril, you have a very active nightlife. And so, wherever there is a very active nightlife, you want to have more police presence, because that's the only way you can guarantee security, by having more presence, particularly in these areas. So these are things that we are looking to see how we can improve. So I think I've given a kind of general overview. If I've left anything out, I'll pick them up in the questions that I'm certain will follow. But you have been a wonderful audience. I've had your attention. Thank you so much.